Thank you guys for joining us this morning. Again, my name is Jerry Havens. I'm Director of Sales for T&D Powerskills. I'm not a lineman, but I play one on TV. So if you look at any of the T&D Powerskills training program, you'll see and hear me on the new updates. That being said, I've been in the industry for about 8 years, and I've had to learn a lot about the industry and a lot about how to train in this industry and to train in particular. And I think that's one thing that that is lost. We give these foremen, we move them into safety and training, and then all of a sudden they're expected to know how to pass their knowledge on. And not everybody can do that effectively. Nobody's a born teacher. We all have these skill sets that we have to learn. Well, I'm here to help you try to learn some of that today. Applying adult learning principles to your craft training program is what we'll be talking about today. Now, what is a principle? Basically, a principle is a comprehensive and fundamental doctrine or assumption. And I like that, comprehensive and fundamental doctrine. So this is going to be comprehensive among all of this. Now, it's not going to be effective for everything, but it will, it'll help you get a basic and a basic understanding, a basis and basic understanding of what we're going to be talking about today. So let's start at the start. What is adult learning? Well, andragogy, which is some Greek thrown out for you there, is a method and practice of teaching adult learners, or adult education, basically. So Malcolm Knowles brought the term andragogy into use basically, I think it was in the 50s. It's basically man leading, andragogy, and it's distinguishable from child leading, pedagogy. So it's basically the process of learning. So it places that emphasis on the process of learning. When we graduate school, we get out of school and take our experiences into the workforce, we bring all of that with us, carry all that baggage with us. So we're not just a student anymore. We have this life experience that we have with us. So we have to focus on the process of a learning. Andragogy, or adult learning, uses approaches learning that are problem-based, collaborative, rather than strictly lecture-based. There's no more of that Bueller thing happening. So it also emphasizes more equality between the instructor and the learner. You're often teaching your peers, instructing your peers. So you're bringing that into the classroom with you as well. And that being said, adult learners bring their personal knowledge and experience to each learning activity. They're typically internally motivated and self-directed. And that's one that we need to remember as well, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Most importantly, they need learning to be practical and relevant. Relevancy is going to be absolutely key because they're pressed for time. Everybody has other things going on, and everybody has different learning styles. We'll talk about those learning styles a little more in depth. Everybody has typically 3 styles: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Your visual learners learn by seeing things more. They instinctively follow directions, can easily visualize objects. They typically have a great sense of balance and alignment, and they're generally great organizers. Everything has its place, everything is in its place. Auditory learners are learn by listening or lecture. Understanding subtle changes, they hear between the lines, is what I like to say. They hear what you're saying or what you're not saying, more so. They're the note takers in class. They'll be the ones taking the best notes because they're listening, pulling out what they need from that lecture. They're great at oral exams. They follow along and answer the questions very well. They learn by storytelling or good orators or storytellers themselves. They're great at solving difficult problems because they talk through it, and they're great at working in groups. Typically, they are the ones seen leading the group discussion. And here you have the kinesthetic learner. Now, these are the hands-on learners, and they're predominantly the learners of our industry. The kinesthetic learners are the ones that have to be out in the middle of it, getting their hands dirty. They have great hand-eye coordination, usually quick reception to things, tasks given to them. Excellent experimenters. They're the ones that'll take it apart, put it back together, and learn how it's done while they're doing that. Typically good at sports, art, drama, anything that gets them out and active. And they typically have high levels of energy. If you're teaching class and you have one guy in the front bobbing his leg up and down, or a lady bobbing the leg up and down, they're ready to get out and get to it. 9 times out of 10, they're probably a kinesthetic learner. So let's talk about what those learning styles entail and some of the difficulties involved with teaching them. So the visual learners, they need to see the instructor's facial expressions and body language to fully understand the content. They're the ones that are usually sitting in the front of the class. They need to avoid those visual distractions. And they tend to think in pictures and learn best from visual displays. So your whiteboards, your visual discussions, or your visual aids that you bring to class, all of those will help those visual learners. And they tend to take really good notes too, just like those auditory learners, but they're taking notes on what they see more than what they hear. Now, some of the problems with teaching those visual learners is difficulty following verbal directions. We have to see things to make it. Noise gets distracted. If there's conversations going on, we're going to squirrel in a heartbeat. We'll follow those because it's distracting us from what we're seeing. And then the visual learners may misinterpret spoken words. So if you're just telling somebody something like do this, 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 and this, and there's nothing around it, it's just that those instructions, you may have a hard time with just those visual learners because there's no notes to take, nothing to see. Now, if you do that and you're showing them a picture of what you want them to do, it's going to go a lot better for you. Auditory learners, those are the guys that like to listen to things. They learn best through lectures, discussions, and brainstorming. The discussions and brainstorming are key. That's where those auditory learners are really going to get the meat of what you're doing. Brainstorming is one of my favorite things. I'm an auditory learner as my secondary. And when you get in and you start talking about things, and after that initial concept is made, it is really key to help bringing everything together. Those auditory learners interpret the underlying meaning of speech by listening to voice, the tone, pitch, and speed. Like I said, they hear between the lines. All those little speech nuances. Written information has little meaning to them. You're not going to get an auditory learner to get a direction book, get the instruction booklet and go to town. It doesn't happen. They benefit best by reading the text aloud or using a tape recorder. I've seen a lot of those auditory learners kick in with the little mini recorders, the voice recorders on your phone. Help a lot, and I've seen a lot of guys do that. They'll read it out and then play it back. And the cool thing about that is they can play that back, and it's just cooking in the background for them because they're hearing it, and they can still be doing other things too. But some of the problems with those auditory learners is they have difficulty following the written instructions, and difficulty with tasks that include reading. So if you say do this and then read this one, read this book, it's not gonna go so well. So you have to take that into account. Our kinesthetic learners are our hands-on guys. And they learn best through hands-on approach, actively exploring the physical world around them. Those are the ones that are gonna be in it, man. They've got their hands going. And like I said, predominantly this industry are your kinesthetic learners. They have difficulty sitting still for long periods of time. They become easily distracted by their need for activity and exploration. ADD. A lot of your kinesthetic learners are the ADHD or ADD kids from school. We didn't do well in class. We had to be out in it. Some of those problems dealing with that person is they have to be actively involved in the learning process. You have to get them moving or doing. And the lectures and discussions don't do it for them. They're not going to sit still long enough. They will be distracted. They're going to get bored easily, and you're going to lose them. So everybody uses those 3 styles. They use them in different ways, though. So you'll have a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary way of doing things. So you'll have primary is auditory, secondary being kinesthetic, or in your visual is your tertiary, or kinesthetic, visual, and auditory. This right here is the main one for a lot of our industry, that kinesthetic, visual, and auditory. Or kinesthetic, auditory, and visual too. The secondary and tertiaries can swap pretty easily, but that kinesthetic, that primary learning style will dictate how you need to proceed with your teaching. So there are laws for everything. Everything you do has a law. No firearms, no trespassing, we're tired of hiding the body, speed limit 45. But what is a law? Basically, a law is a rule or action that is prescribed or formally recognized as binding, or a rule or order that is advisable or obligatory to observe. Okay? So what do laws have to do with this? Well, there are basically 7 laws of teaching adult learners. The first law is the law of previous experience. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that everybody brings their baggage with them when they come to class. So new learners, learning should be linked to and build upon the experiences of the learner. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be something that they can take this and go, okay, this will fit in this baggage here. We're going to stuff it in there with all the rest of that stuff. So that previous experience is going to color everything that you do and say to that learner. The law of relevance. Effective learning is and must be relevant to the learner's life and work. Typically, when you're teaching somebody, you're teaching your peers in this industry, it's already relevant. But you have to make sure that it stays relevant. You can't get off on a tangent and get into something that's completely off subject or off, non-relevant anymore, because you're going to lose them. And as soon as you do that, they're gone, and it's going to take a while to pull everybody back. So the third law is self-direction, the law of self-direction. Most adults, and most is the key word here, most adults are self-directed learners. They're going to class, they're getting this craft training, they're getting this education. Either they were asked to by their company, which fits into what they want to do, or they want to pursue a better pay, a better job, more knowledge in the industry. They want to move up in the ladder. That self-directed is where they're coming from. Now, this third law to me is the one that really cinches everything, because they're there because they want to be. It's not detention learning anymore. You're not writing lines in class as a kid. These guys are here because they want to be. The fourth law of teaching adults is the law of expectations. The learner's reaction to a training session is shaped by their expectations related to the content area, the training format, fellow participants, and the trainer. Let's talk about that. The content area, where they're getting their training. Where are you performing your training at? Are you in your training yard, your training facility? Are you in the field somewhere? Are you sending them out to a conference? It depends. All of that colors how they're going to receive the training. The format. Death by PowerPoint? Do you incorporate audio and visual into your training? Do you have a lot of things going on? Is there a lot of distractions? Fellow participants, speaking of distractions, sometimes, just like when they were kids, they had to be broken up into groups. But also, is it a classroom of your peers? Are you learning on the same level? Is everybody at the same level of their training? And probably the most important one, the trainer. The trainer is going to play a huge part in this, which is what we're talking about today. Nobody is a born trainer, like I said before. They're not a born teacher. But hopefully, you're going to get better and better at it, and you'll be the trainer. And we'll come back to how being a trainer helps, or what to do as a trainer. The law of self-image. Now, I know me. I know how I learn. Everybody does. Everybody has their own style of learning, and they know what they learn best with. Mostly. They think they know how they learn best. But they do have those definite notions about what type of learner that they are. and they're either going to interfere with it or enhance their learning. And you as a trainer have to see how your guys are doing. When you're presenting the information, you can tell immediately who is getting it and how they're getting it. The sixth law is the law of multiple criteria. Adult learners use a variety of standards to judge their learning experiences and accomplishments. Again, like I said, they bring that baggage with them, but they're going to be using that to judge what you're giving. Are they picking up what you're putting down? And they're using those multiple forms of, hey, this is what I knew at this point, this is what I learned here. Are you giving me something that I can use in the future? Is this worth picking up? The law of alignment. Adult learners require the training objectives, content, and activities and assessment techniques to be aligned to each other. Everything has to fit properly and fit in with itself. It has to form that perfect mesh. If you have your training objectives here, but your content is way down here, and then your activities are here and your assessment techniques are over here, which your assessment techniques are just as important as the content and all this other stuff. It all has to line up, okay? Otherwise, one thing is going to distract from the other. If you do all of this stuff right, if you take those laws into account, you take the adult learning principles into account, you combine the right ingredients in the right way, it's just like baking a cake. You're going to get something good. But if you leave one thing out, you leave the eggs out, it's not going to come together. You leave the oil out, it's not going to come together. If you leave the sugar out, it's definitely not going to be, you get bread. So what do you do when you put all that together? What are you going to get? Well, basically, you'll get passive and active learning. So passive learning, and all of this is scalable too. It builds upon itself. So your passive learning, if you're just listening to a lecture, you're going to see about a 5% knowledge retention, okay? If you get into the lecture plus the reading, if they're reading a workbook or like a student workbook while they're doing it, listening to you, they're going to get about a 10% retention rate. If you add audiovisual components to that, it jumps up again. If you do a demonstration on all of that, it jumps up to about a 30%. Now that's passive teaching methods. That's you presenting a topic or material with no interaction from the participants, okay? You get into participatory teaching methods, you take those other learning styles into account, group discussion, take those auditory and, learners in there, practice, get those kinesthetic learners in there and get them in doing things. That really takes into account all of your styles, your auditory, your visual, and your kinesthetic. Now, 75%, that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal rate. How do you get higher than that? When you start teaching. So as an instructor, you were a learner, and then somebody said, man, you're pretty good at your job. Why don't you teach some other people how to do that? Oh, wow, man. Now, I got to go back and learn everything again. I got to go make sure that I know what I'm doing and present it. That's when you get the really high-end retention rates, is teaching others. So once you become a pro at your job and you're tasked with being that mentor, that's when it really clicks for you and you become the mentor, the guru, the person to talk to. So the passive teaching methods are scalable, and you add the participatory teaching methods or the active learning in there, and you really, really amp up your training. So we talked about the laws, but there's always rules. You know, you have those rules. If you break a law, what happens? Well, you're going to be judged. So trust me, you are being judged when you're in front of class. So here's some things that you don't want to be, okay? You don't want to be an infomercial. And I have a tendency to be an infomercial trainer. But wait, there's more. That over the top, high energy. Now, I'm not saying that all of these are bad, but all of these exclusively are bad. So when I say don't be an infomercial trainer, you want energy. You want to keep everybody from falling asleep, but you don't want to do that for the whole thing because then it becomes a drone, okay? Don't be a TMI trainer. TMI, too much information. I'm nothing but stories. I'm nothing but, oh, this is what happened to me. And once you start sharing, you have a tendency to overshare. Don't be unprepared. That's this one. Actually, I should have put this one way up here. If you are unprepared, you are showing that their time is not worth your effort. Okay, that one will get you bigger than anything. Don't be a pushover. We deal with strong personalities in this industry. Doing so, we have to be strong ourselves, because you'll have guys like me run right over you. As far as, I'm a strong personality. I know that about myself. I know that I will cut a joke in a heartbeat to distract from the fact that I'm not getting anything out of what I'm learning. I know myself. Don't be that pushover. Put your thumb down on some things and say, okay, this is what we're here for. Don't be a brick. You don't want to be, okay, everybody's seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Bueller, 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 same monotone, nothing ever changes. People are going to go to sleep on you in a heartbeat. Don't be a know-it-all. Yeah, I knew that. Oh, yeah, oh, I know. Yeah, I know what you're doing. You always have that one-up conversation. You don't have to know it all to teach. In fact, one of my greatest things that I've ever learned is, I don't know, but let me find out for you. If somebody comes at you with a question, and you're supposed to be the expert because you're teaching, if you don't know it, admit you don't know it and say, look, let me get back to you on that, because not everybody knows everything. Don't be the silly games trainer. I love training games. My friend and coworker, Mac Turner, has some great practical learning games that he does. The drunk goggles and the ping pong ball on the tracks. Phenomenal learning games, teaching games. The problem is when that's all it is, it becomes the game and not the learning. Okay? So you have to be careful. You have to be able to integrate all of these in an effective manner. Don't be the reader. You're not just going to get up here and that's the death by PowerPoint, just read the slide. Because then you go from here to being the brick. Since everybody is doing this at work, don't be late and don't be long. That's up here with unprepared. Their time is just as valuable as yours, more so actually. Especially if you're in the industry where these guys are coming off of the line to go to work or to go to training. If they're out working, they're making money. So don't be late or long. Have your people's best interest in mind. So I know it sounds like a lot, and I crammed a lot of it in a very short amount of time because I talk really fast. But it sounds like a lot. You're not going to be great overnight. Nobody's a born teacher. Practice. It is essential. So if you have a presentation or you have something that you're going to do, a class that you're going to teach, don't be afraid to stand in front of the mirror and practice. Get somebody to videotape you on your phone and watch it over and over. You'd be surprised at how much you learn from watching yourself. You learn you need to suck your gut in a little bit more, talk a little bit better, It's all the things that you don't think about. Listen to your feedback and incorporate it into the next one. I'm a big fan of that. Constructive criticism is phenomenal as far as helping you get better. Learn from your peers. This industry is just chock full of people who know so much, have done it, they've seen it. Take that criticism from them, take that advice from them, and build yourself a better training program. And then also pay attention to your students. They're going to let you know what they need. They're going to let you know, like I said, if they're picking up what you're putting down. You'll know immediately. And this is a really good one that I like. So, and this is going to sound sales pitchy, but I promise you it's not. The T&D Powerskills program, which is what I do, we incorporate all these adult learning principles. So you have your video, your audio by your lecturer, the student workbook, and then the field performance requirement, or FPR. So that covers the kinesthetic. So you watch the video, you follow along the student workbook, you do the test, then you get out in the yard and you do the FPR. Well, that is where, when you get out in the yard and you start doing that FPR, pay attention to your students. You're going to see where you are as a trainer. You're going to see, okay, well, they're not getting it until we do this. Where's my disconnect within this other part of the program? You'll know immediately. Another great thing about that is because it takes all those learning styles into account, when you get out in the yard, you start paying attention to how your guys are picking it up. You're really going to know, okay, they're learning this, or I need to pull a little bit back on this one and go heavier on this. So it's great when you see it all come together, and that only happens when you pay attention to your students. So I know it sounds like a lot. There's going to be some questions. This right here is my cell phone number. It is on all the time, with the exception it goes off at 9:30 Central, comes back on at 4:30 or 5 in the morning Central Time. Feel free to shoot me a text or an email, jerry@tdpowerskills.com. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Thanks, Beer Meters and Ecos, for having us here. We appreciate it. And again, get out there, train safe.